Hey everyone, it's Andrew. Before we begin today's video, I want to let you know that everyone was okay in the making of this video. Lesson learned, always make sure you have a fire extinguisher on hand when working with old electronics. Enjoy!
Fire! Jesus.
Hey guys, it's Andrew with another LoveTech video. Today we're going to be hopping in the time machine back to the year 1986 when Apple released the Macintosh 512KE. Now this machine is very reminiscent of my childhood because it was the first machine that I used as a kid. I spent countless hours on this machine making all kinds of cool drawings and doing Word documents and spreadsheets and everything. So I'm super excited to power it up, but first off we're going to go through some of the specs, so stay tuned. Before we get into today's video, I want to introduce you to a new mini-series here on LoveTech called LoveTech Time Machine. LoveTech Time Machine is our first mini-series here on our YouTube channel dedicated to reviewing and educating our viewers about some of Apple's best and most revolutionary products from the past. Throughout these videos, you may hear this sound. When heard, this signifies an interesting Apple fact from the past. Without further ado, welcome into the LoveTech Time Machine, Episode 1, the Macintosh 512KE from 1986. So before we power up the machine today and see if it still works, I want to get into some of the specs on the Macintosh 512KE and talk a little bit about this as a unit, and then also get into the Image Writer 2, which is the printer that works with the Macintosh 512KE. The Macintosh 512KE was Apple's 14th release of the Macintosh computer in their computer lineup. Similar to the 128K and 512K, which were released a couple years earlier in 1984, the 512K was mainly targeted at business or end users that were in business lines. This was because of the enhanced amount of memory in this machine. Now, the 128K didn't have enough RAM in it to run applications such as Microsoft Excel. The 512K and the 512KE did, however, have enough RAM to do that. Another nice thing about the 512KE is the memory in it could actually be upgraded to 1 megabyte of memory, and in some instances, even 2 megabytes of memory. Now you may be wondering, what was the big difference between the 512K, which was released in 1984, and the 512KE, which was released in 1986? The 1986 model, or the second edition of this computer, had an 800 kilobyte floppy disk drive and the same improved 128K ROM that the Macintosh Plus had. Now the Macintosh Plus was the model that Apple released side by side basically with the 512KE in 1986. The Macintosh 512KE retailed for $2,000, which in today's money would have been a whopping $4,704. The additional disk drive over here that you can see on the left-hand side of the computer retailed for an additional $500, which in today's money would have been $1,176. So that's just crazy to think how much these two pieces of computer equipment retailed for, and that's not even including the Image Writer 2 printer, which we'll get to in just a second. Now the Image Writer 2 printer was released alongside of the Macintosh 512KE in 1986, and it retailed for $595. In today's money, that would be approximately $1,400. Now if you add up all the costs of these devices, the Image Writer 2, the Macintosh 512KE, and the 800 kilobyte external floppy disk drive, the total cost would come out to $3,095, so almost $3,100 for these items. Now in today's money, that would be $7,280. Yeah, $7,280. That's an insane amount of money for this equipment. Now, back in the day, these were very revolutionary products. The Macintosh 512K and the 128K were actually Apple's first computers that you could use a mouse with. So this was actually Apple's first mouse or mouse input device, which had a trackball on the bottom and was quite revolutionary for the time. So Adding all this up, it comes out, as I mentioned before, to almost $3,100, which in today's money would be about $7,300. With that type of money today, you could actually go out and buy an iMac Pro with an 18-core Xeon in it and a Radeon Pro Vega 64X 16GB graphics card for $7,300. So very comparable setup, but that's just to show how far we as a society and as Apple has advanced with technology, that is we've gone from 1986, right, where we didn't even have like a 1 megabyte RAM module in this machine to having, you know, like 32, 64, 128 gigabytes of RAM in a machine. It's just amazing to me in the last like 30 to 35 years how far we have come as a society in computer technology. Now, back in the day, Apple didn't call their operating systems Mac OS, they called them System 1, System 2, System 3, etc. Now, the Macintosh 512KE could run System 1.0 all the way up to 6.0, which was released in 1988. Another thing that gets commonly mistaken with these machines is that there is no internal hard drive in these. Yeah, kind of crazy, right? How you actually boot into the OS is you actually have to put a floppy disk into the disk drive here in order to run System 1 through System 6 on this machine. This is why the external disk drive is so important, because if you need to boot into the OS and have a usable operating system, so for example, switching between apps or being able to run a couple apps at the same time, what you'll need to do is have the disk for the operating system actually in this drive here, and then have any of your program disks running off of the secondary floppy drive here. Now, along with the Macintosh 512KE, Apple released what was called their Hard Disk 20 device. The Hard Disk 20 device was a 20 megabyte external hard drive that you could actually load System 1 through System 6 onto and boot off of that. That way it would free up one of your disk drives, floppy disk drives, on your main computer itself. That way, effectively, you would never have to put in a floppy disk drive to boot into the OS. However, at the time, that 20 megabyte hard disk drive, everyone take a guess down below in the comments, I'd love to hear this. Guess how much you think that disk drive retailed for? A 20 megabyte hard disk back in 1986 that was an external drive. Now, if you guess like $500 or $600, no, it's even higher than that. It's even higher than $1,000. The external hard disk 20 megabyte drive from Apple ran a whopping $1,500. Yeah, $1,500. That is absolutely crazy for 20 megabyte external hard disk drive. In today's kind of terms, you could go out and buy 20 terabytes of external storage and still have a ton of money left over to spend. Now I've touched base on the Image Writer 2 and some of the accessories that went along with the Macintosh 512KE. Let's talk about some of the internals on this machine and also some of the peripheral I/O ports on the outside of it. The Macintosh 512KE ran a Motorola 68000 processor, which was connected directly to the system's 512K of RAM via a 16-bit bus. The screen on the Macintosh 512KE was a 9-inch screen, which was 512 pixels wide and 346 pixels tall. That's 72 pixels per inch. As I mentioned a little bit earlier on in this video, the Macintosh 512K and the Macintosh 128 were actually the first computers to implement the mouse as a peripheral device on screen. Before this time, you had to use just a keyboard to navigate around your operating system. The mouse and cursor was revolutionary to the marketplace and set Apple computers, in my mind, apart from a lot of other computers at its time. The invention of the mouse was something that no one had ever done before, and it really revolutionized how you could navigate around the Mac operating system and also increase your productivity. Flipping the Macintosh 512KE around to the back, you'll notice a series of serial ports. Now, in this day and age, this was way before the time of anything like USB ports or FireWire ports even, so everything was done via serial port buses. Flipping it around to the backhand side, our serial ports on the back from left to right include the mouse serial port, the external disk drive serial port, the printer serial port, the modem serial port, and then over on the right-hand side, an audio jack. Now moving up on the backhand side of this machine, you'll notice that there is the power cord, the power switch, and then above that there is a battery door which keeps the internal system's battery in it. Looking at the top-hand side of the machine, you'll notice that there are two big large vents along the top, and then also underneath the carrying handle, which is up here on the top as well, there's also a third vent under there. Now the Macintosh 512KE and the Macintosh 128 and the Macintosh 512K in general, none of these actually had operating fans inside of them, so they had to invent a way for the heat to escape. Now flipping the Macintosh 512KE around to the front, you'll notice that there is, as I mentioned before, the 9-inch 72 pixel per inch screen. Below that we have the floppy disk drive. Underneath that is where you plug the keyboard into. It looks almost like a phone jack port kind of, but it's not really a phone jack. And then over here on the left-hand side of the computer, underneath the Apple logo is actually the screen brightness. So you could actually adjust the screen brightness on this computer. Now, before we get into the second part of this video where we're actually going to boot this up and run some of the programs and show you how to boot the computer up itself, I want to talk about the ImageWriter 2 printer, which, as I mentioned earlier on this video, retailed for $595 back in 1986. Now, one thing that surprised me about the ImageWriter 2 printer is that it's actually a color printer. I did not realize it was actually a color printer, so that's pretty cool. Now, printers back in the 1980s actually did not use normal paper. They used the paper that had the holes on the sides that you'd actually have to tear off after you printed on them. So if you've been to a car dealer, chances in the past 10 years or so, you probably have seen them use printers very similar to the ImageWriter 2, which had the holes on the sides of the paper, which they'd have to rip off and then give you the piece of paper. That's how the printers worked back in the 1980s. So now we've talked a little bit about the Macintosh 512KE and done a little bit of a history lesson on this and the ImageWriter 2 printer along with the 800 kilobyte external disk drive over here. Let's get to powering this thing on. I have no clue if it's even going to work because, again, it's been sitting in a closet for the past 20 years. A lot of transistors, resistors, capacitors, things like that, as time goes on in these computers, can just go. Also, the backup battery could be completely bad in it. I have no clue. So it will be very interesting to see kind of, is this even going to turn on? If it does turn on, is it going to explode or is it not? Hopefully not. I actually found some floppy disks from the 1990s that I actually saved some of my old kid files on, so it'll be kind of fun to look at some of my drawings from the 1990s if we can get this thing to boot up. So with that, I will be back once I get everything plugged in and show you guys how to boot it up. All right, everyone, welcome back. So we got the Macintosh 512KE plugged in. We had a little bit of an interesting time because we actually opened up the battery door on the back, which keeps track of the time, which is the PRAM battery, and also keeps track of some other system settings. And we found out that it was completely corroded. Now, I have no clue if this machine will actually boot up without the PRAM battery. If you happen to know if it will or not before I even try, leave your comments down below. I'd like to know more about this. I was not able to actually find any information online as to if this machine itself would actually boot up or not. Hopefully we will not need the fire extinguisher to put this thing out if it for some reason blows up. Lately, I've actually been watching some videos online that have shown me some of these old computers can actually blow up when you start them up. So hopefully there's nothing bad that happens with this machine because, again, has not been turned on for like 20 years, as we found out with the battery being totally corroded inside. So will be interesting. So with that, let's show you how to start this guy up. So again, after you plug in the computer itself, you're going to need to grab the Macintosh startup disk, which this is the System and MacWrite and MacPaint disk. I believe this is the correct disk. What you need to do before you even start the computer up, it's not going to do anything unless you put the disk in to start it up into Mac OS or OS System 5 or 6. I don't know exactly what we have here. We'll know more once we get into the OS if it boots up. So with that, just put that into the machine there. On the back side, there is a power button, power switch, and I have no clue if it's going to work. I am actually, I think, going to step out of the frame because I don't want like this exploding in my face if it were to explode. So I'm going to step off to the side here, turn it on, and see if anything happens. Okay, you ready? 3, 2, 1. Oh my gosh, it's booting up. Oh my gosh. I remember this now. Oh my gosh, this is so reminiscent. It actually is booting up. It actually booted up. Oh my gosh, it actually worked. Wow, that boots up actually really quick. I did not remember that booting up that quick. So apparently you do not need the clock battery in it to start up into the system. It is not smoking. There's no broken transistors or resistors. That is amazing. I don't know how that is. I guess we can launch Mac Write. So it makes that noise. That's what scared me before when it was reading off the floppy disk. I forgot it made that noise. So when I first turned it on before, it was like, burr, burr, burr. I'm like, what the heck is going on? And it kind of scared me, but it actually looks like everything works and is intact. So that is fantastic. So yeah, this is Mac Write. And this was Apple's basic word processing program, kind of like Microsoft Word for the day. So you can, like, obviously just type on this, and this keyboard is very loud. Cap locks is on. So as you can hear, I am definitely not used to typing on this keyboard. It's very springy. There's lots of springs in it. I did also some other research on this computer, and for the keyboard, that is, you could actually, back in 1986, not 1984, but the 1986 version of this computer, you could actually optionally order an additional keyboard with a numeric pad on the side of it. So another interesting thing about the Macintosh 512KE from 1986. So I am going to have some fun with Mac Write here. I'm just gonna type in, this is an awesome old computer. It brings back many memories from my childhood. So now that I got a letter, a nice little letter typed up here, I am actually going to try printing to the Image Writer 2 printer. Now, this printer has not been on for probably like 30 years, not 20, but more like 30 years. Most likely the cartridge in it is not going to work. But then again, I didn't think this computer was going to boot up without the battery in it. So I've been fooled already once today. So who knows, maybe it will work. So on here, we're just gonna simply go up to File menu and go down to Print, and let's see if the Image Writer 2 pops up. Okay, so here's our printer dialog. It does detect the Image Writer printer because it did bring up the printer dialog version 2.3. Quality, we're just gonna do faster and automatic paper feed and 1. And then we're gonna click on the OK button and let's see if it actually prints. I have no clue, but it'll be interesting to see if will this actually print on the Image Writer 2. Now it says printing in progress on the screen. That's a good sign, I guess. And there it goes. And it is actually printing in Chicago. Amazingly enough, after 30 something years of not being used, it actually printed and it actually worked. I am very amazed. I am very, very amazed that that actually worked. That was very interesting. So now that the printer printed my wonderful letter, I'm going to, I guess you just rip it off like this, right? Gotta love sprocket printing. At least that's what I call it. I don't know what it's actually called. It's kind of faint, but I am actually miraculously surprised that after over 30 years of this printer being off and shut into a closet, that it actually printed something. I'll hold it up here, but you can see my awesome Chicago font custom letter to myself printed on the Apple Image Writer 2 printer from, 1986. Still absolutely shocks me that that actually worked and it actually printed. Now there is some definite horizontal banding on there. It's not super dark or anything, but I am very shocked that it actually did work. So, oops. It's actually pretty cool. I guess I started separating it from the paper too. So the holes, the sprockets are in the holes. That's funny. Anyway, the printer does work, so I am very impressed. So with that, I'm going to close out on Mac Write and not save my changes because that letter, I have it printed, so I don't need to save it. Let's launch Mac Paint now. So Mac Paint is like the Microsoft Paint of the 1980s era. So, oh my gosh, that's so funny. It even says Mac Paint by Bill Atkinson when it starts up. So that's hilarious. So whoever wrote this program, Apple even gave a shout out to them. So when it's launching, so that's pretty cool. Wow, this brings back lots of nostalgic memories of countless hours of drawing on the screen, drawing images, using the spray. Oh my goodness, countless memories. Again, we have our font menu, font size, and style. So kind of like the same thing with Mac Write, but only you also have the painting options in here. So brings back lots of memories. A little bit later on, we're gonna actually go through and take a look at some of my old memories that I painted from the past. That should be lots of fun. So with that, I'm just gonna quit out of Mac Paint for now and not save any changes, and we'll go back to the main screen. So now that we've taken a look at Mac Paint and Mac Write, let's go in and take a look at the actual system itself. I'm actually curious to see what version of the Mac OS or System OS this is actually running from way back when, because again, this can run up to System 6 on it, and I don't know exactly what it has. I believe it shipped with System 4 or 5, so we'll have to see what system we're running on. We'll go and look at some of the cool things about the system itself. So one thing I want to mention really quick, at the beginning of this video, I had mentioned that this system has to boot off of 2 different disks, right? One disk boots the OS, one disk boots the applications. The disk that I actually have in the floppy disk drive in the main computer right now actually is interesting because it's the system like backup or restore disk, which actually has the Mac operating system on it along with Mac Paint and Mac Write. So actually it's kind of interesting because it's all in one sort of disk. Most of the other things on this computer, you have to use 2 different disk drives because you have to maintain a functioning operating system while you are running separate applications. So a little bit later on in this video, we'll get into Mac Project, which I actually have never used. That'll be very interesting, and we'll take a look at that as well, and I'll maybe do another printout of a cool like diagram or something. We'll make a cool diagram. So anyway, with that, let's take a look at the actual system itself. So let's go into About Finder. Let's see. The Macintosh Finder, Bruce Horn and Steve Capps, version 5.3. So I believe, looking at this, we are running System 5.3. This can run up to System 6 on it. So based on that, I think it is 5.3. We'll click out of that really quick. We have a chooser, so I'm guessing we can choose what to boot up on. Chooser, select a printer port, username. Interesting. I have no clue what that is, but it looks like you can choose printer ports or something. I don't know what that is. I don't have no clue. Control panel. Let's look at control panel, everyone. This is what the Mac control panel, back in the day when they actually called it control panel and not system preferences. Oh, wow. So you can change the desktop pattern. So that's interesting. Apple Talk, which I believe, I have no clue what Apple Talk is. Do you know what Apple Talk is? I have no clue. There's something on the back of the machine that you can actually use for Apple Talk. I'm not exactly sure what Apple Talk is. If you guys know what Apple Talk is, leave it down in the comments below. I'd like to know. Speaker volume. So this has internal speakers. Okay. So as we adjust the speaker bar, you'll notice that the speakers get quieter or louder. So it does have an internal speaker. There's also an auxiliary port on the back that you can hook in, I believe, external speakers to. Mouse tracking, so we can determine, are we using a mouse or a tablet? So back then you apparently could use a tablet with the Macintosh 512KE. Your double click speed, so slow, medium, or fast. The rate of insertion, rate of insertion, so the point blinking. So how fast is that point blinking in our word processing programs? how does that all work? The RAM cache, if that's on or off, and then down here, the key repeat rate and delay until repeat. So that was it for system settings in the control panel back in 1986. So yeah, Apple has come a long ways in the control panel, not called control panel anymore. It's called system preferences. Interestingly enough, Microsoft stole control panel from Apple, I guess. I don't know. And then our keycaps, which I believe, yeah, this is just showing us like a on-screen type of keyboard here. Oh my gosh, this brings back so many memories, but new memories too, because there's a lot of things as a young kid of 3 or 4 that I'd never explored in here. So very interesting in my mind. So within Finder, we can create a new folder, open, close, get info, page setup, print catalog, and eject. So the eject button, or the eject out of the file menu, actually will eject our floppy disk out of the computer for us. So there was no eject key on the keyboard, there was no eject key on the actual computer itself. It was all done through software. So kind of interesting. There is a clipboard, believe it or not, from back then. That's crazy. Up here at the top, you can also view by small icons. So this shows like the little icons, the main icons. You can view by name, etc. So very similar to what you can do in today's Finder. And then finally, over on the special menu, there's a cleanup, erase disk, and use mini Finder. I wonder what is use mini Finder. Let's look at what mini Finder. Install the mini Finder using the selected documents or applications and remove the mini Finder. Interesting. I'm not going to do that, but I have no clue what mini Finder is. That's interesting. Let's go into letters. Let's open this up just for the heck of it. There's face 2 and dots. I think these might be old files that I created when I was a kid. We'll actually take a look at that too in a little bit here. We'll take a look at some of the old files I created on this computer back 20 something years ago. What is letters? Gotta love the disk loading this. What is letters? Oh my gosh. Lots of letters. So I'm pretty sure I created this when I was a kid because it's kind of crazy and looks funny and that's funny. Back to the backup disk startup, face 2. I feel like I should be very scared to open this up in Mac Paint. Let's see what kind of face I drew when I was like 5 years old. Wow. That's face 2. Apparently I drew this scary looking, creepy, funny, hieroglyphic-y, Egyptian, weird looking face thing in Mac Paint back when. I honestly, like these discs here, these have my name on them, so there's probably a lot more on these we'll take a look at here in a second. But wow, that's kind of creepy. All right, I'll quit out of that. No need to see that face anymore. All right, so now let's take a look at these other 2 mysterious files on the backup disk that I saved back in like 1990 something. Something called dots. Dots is coming up. What is dots saying? Lots of dots. Oh my gosh, I was such a weird child. I just like randomly made random files in here and called it dots. Let's take a look at the last file on this backup disk, and then we will use the secondary disk drive to load in a couple more of these. Colors. Did I write the name of all the colors back in 1995 or 1996 before I even was in 1st grade? Who knows? Let's see. Colors in MacWrite. Wow, I did. That's funny. All right, so now let's have some more fun and look at some other things that I created when I was a kid on this computer. This is my first disk. It says Andrew on it. And put it in the secondary disk drive and see if that works. Should load. Let's see if it loads. How do I use a secondary disk drive? Maybe you have to close out of that? Backup disk. Let's see. All right, guys, so we're back now. we had a little bit of trouble getting stuff kind of working correctly. Apparently the automatic disk ejectors on, I think, both the external and the internal drive aren't functioning properly, so we're having to manually push a paperclip into an eject hole in the drive itself. So it's making being able to view these different disks kind of a challenge. However, I was able to get the external drive working. Apparently, you need to make sure that the external drive is on the right-hand side of the Mac, not the left-hand side of the Mac, because that can cause interference with the drive and the magnets inside of it. The other thing you also need to do is on the external drive, you need to make sure you push the disk in far enough until it kind of gets into place. That's one thing that I messed up on, and so it didn't work for a long time, so we thought the disk drive was broken, but then we eventually kind of figured that out. So with that, I got the external disk drive working, and the internal one is also working fine. We got the disk ejected out of that before as well. So let's go in and take a look at what is on my Andrew 1 disk from like the 1990s.
Fire! Get the fire extinguisher.
And unplug the power. Oh, Jesus. Wow, so I just got done, yeah, oh my gosh. That's all I can say right now. So guys, I just had a fire from this computer and it absolutely scared the living crap out of me because I ironically just saw a video on capacitors and transistors and resistors and stuff inside of computers from the Computer Clan channel. Definitely go check him out. He's a great guy, explains all kinds of great stuff regarding Macs and stuff. But anyway, ironically, I just saw this video like 2 weeks ago about how an old computer of his did the same exact thing where it smoked and the transistor went out and that's exactly what just happened here. So yeah, it scared the living crap out of me, as you can tell. Fortunately, there was no actual fire, it was just smoke. I immediately went in and pulled the power cord out, turned the power off so the computer itself probably didn't sustain much damage inside. The smoke smelled absolutely horrible, so yeah, hopefully everything's fine there. However, I hope you guys really enjoyed the video here on the channel today. Was not expecting it to end that way, but was expecting to show you some more stuff about the computer itself and show you some more actual things with like some of the applications and everything, but that obviously did not happen. So I hope you really enjoyed the video. Hopefully it made you laugh. Everyone is okay here, and I hope you really enjoyed it. So yeah, I'll flip the camera around here. This is the aftermath. We pulled the computer out, put it outside, away from everything. So yeah, so everything is a-okay here. So I'm very happy about that, very fortunate. So hopefully you liked the video. If you did, make sure you give it a thumbs up at the top. Leave your comments down below. I'd love to hear what your thoughts and reactions were, especially when I started seeing smoke coming out of the computer. There was a like explosion type thing in the computer, so you can hear that on the video. So again, if you like the video, make sure you comment down below, and then make sure you give it a big thumbs up at the top. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, if you would like to see these videos and more coming your way soon, make sure you hit the subscribe button and the bell at the top. And again, as always, we'll see you next time in another LoveTech video.